Hi there, friends, and welcome back. This is Jennifer McGuire. So a few days ago, I shared a video that shared what I felt is the best method for doing stamp layering with a stamp positioner, such as a MISTI. It gives the most accurate results when you're trying to layer images together to create something realistic. Well, today I'm back to share what I feel is the best method for stamp layering when you do not have a stamp platform such as the MISTI. Sometimes these stamp layering stamp sets can be difficult to do, where you have to layer images perfectly on top of each other to get something realistic. But I have some ideas for you today, and I also have some creative uses for background dyes to share. Now for today's video, I will be using a different type of stamping tool, a much less expensive tool that many of us have from our early days of stamping. This is a stamp positioner. There are many stamp positioners on the market. I like the Art Impressions one. It's very simple, it's clear, and it's inexpensive. These are meant to use with wood-mounted stamps, but today we're going to be using them with clear stamps and acrylic blocks. If you do not have a stamp positioner, I know many people have made their own. All you need is to create an L-shaped piece like the one in my left hand, and sometimes people do that with acrylic blocks, pieces of wood, or even Lego. And then you just need a clear flat piece. Today I will be also using acrylic blocks from Gina. These are comfort blocks, they're new. They have this nice smooth edge so they're easy to hold. And they have engraved lines that are close together, which is very helpful in getting things straight. There are several different sizes available and even a set, but these are the 3 sizes that I use the most, and you'll see me use those today. Let's start by using a stamp positioner how it's intended to be used. So I have the L shape, then that clear rectangle piece that I call the guide. I'm going to put the guide in the corner of the L-shaped piece. Then I will ink up my stamp with whatever ink I want to use. And I'll put my wood-mounted stamp right in the corner of the L and press down. So I'm stamping on the guide. Now I can move this guide around on my card wherever I want it to be, and I can make sure it's straight, and I'm happy with the position. Once I'm happy, I hold the guide in place, bring the L-shaped piece back to the corner. Then I can remove the guide, ink up my stamp, press the stamp down right in the corner of the L, and we have the perfect stamped image. This is a very helpful tool with wood-mounted stamps. However, if you stamp with a lighter ink, watch this, this is yellow ink, and you can't really see it there. You can't see it very well on that clear guide. Whenever I have that situation, I use a piece of thin vellum instead. The lighter ink will show up better on the vellum than it does on that clear piece. The vellum has a little tooth to it, whereas the clear guide doesn't. So you could use either, and you'll see me use both throughout this video. Here you can see how the lighter ink shows up better on the vellum, so we could use that as a guide instead. So let's go ahead and use that stamp positioner to help with stamp layering. Remember, if you didn't see my video for how to do great stamp layering with a stamp platform, check it out up here on the top right or in my description below. Today, I'm not using an expensive stamp positioner, even though I do recommend one. But I know not everyone has one, so I'm hoping today's video is helpful. Let's start by using the new Sunny Studio Sunflower Field stamp set. I really like the realistic looking images this creates, really beautiful flower. So I thought it would be a perfect example for today's technique. Keep in mind that the companies have guides on their website that are very helpful in lining up the layers to create your actual image. So let's start stamping. I have the first layer, which is the most solid image, and I'm inking it up with my lightest ink. And I'll just stamp this onto a bunch of pieces of cardstock. I plan to create a bunch of these and then die cut them, but you could stamp them wherever you want on a card. You could do one at a time, whatever you prefer. I always do multiples so I can make multiple cards. I will have a list of all the particular ink colors I use over on my blog, which I have a link to below, but most of them are from Altenew. Next, I'll go ahead and stamp the first layer of a bunch of leaves. I like that this particular stamp set from Sunny Studio tells you on the package which layers to put together and in what order. So that was the first layer. Now we're going to use our stamp positioner, and instead of the clear guide that it comes with, I'm using a piece of thin vellum. Because I'm using a light color ink, the vellum will be helpful to me today, but I'll show you both throughout, so stay tuned. Okay, so I'm starting with the leaves. I thought I'd do the first layer of the leaf. I've put the vellum into the corner of my L. Then I ink up my stamp and put that into the corner of the L and stamp down onto the vellum. This will stay wet, but that's okay. The good thing about that is we can wipe it up later and use that vellum over and over. Okay, so now I'm going to take the stamped image on the vellum and line it up with the solid image on my cardstock. You can see how easy it is to line it up. Once I have it lined up, I'll hold the vellum in place. Take that L-shaped piece and put it right up against the corner of the vellum. Once I have it right up against the corner, I hold the L-shaped piece down, remove the vellum, ink up my stamp with a slightly darker ink color, this is Altenew Lime, put that right in the corner of the L and press down. And there we have our perfect layered leaf. So let me do that again so you can see I'm lining up the stamped leaf on the vellum with the stamped solid leaf on our cardstock. I put the L-shaped piece right up to the corner of the vellum, remove the vellum, ink up my stamp, put the acrylic block right into the corner of the L, and stamp down. And there you can see how we get perfect layered stamping. Now, if you have a stamp positioner, such as the Misty, you may find that to be an easier method for stamp layering. And that's what I talk about in that other video that I have linked here. However, if you're only stamping one image, or if you have trouble with layering with the Misty, this is another great option. I use this one quite often when I'm only doing layering for one stamped image. So it really just depends on how you work, how you create. You can try both and figure out what works for you. And again, if you do not have a stamp positioner, it's very easy to create your own. All you need to do is create that L-shaped piece out of something that you have on hand. Now let's do the second layer of the flower. So I'm using a slightly darker yellow ink. This is Warm Sunshine. And I'm stamping that onto the vellum piece using the stamp positioner. Now I'm going to line this up over our first layer stamped image on the cardstock. Once I have it lined up, I hold the vellum in place, put the L shape up against the corner, then I will ink up my stamp and stamp that right into the corner of the L shape. If you find it's difficult to look through your light colored ink on the vellum, stay tuned because I have an option for you, which I'll show in my future examples in this video. I'll be honest, in the video it doesn't look like it's easy to line those layers up, but in person it's very easy. You can see through the vellum perfectly and make sure those layers are lined up. Okay, so now that I've done a few of that second layer, let's do the third layer of the leaf. So I'm jumping back and forth between the flower and the leaf. The reason I jump between the two is I like inks to have some time to dry before we add another layer. It keeps the image from looking muddy. So I have the third layer of our leaf, lined it up with the stamped layered piece on our cardstock, and then I'll stamp right into that L-shaped piece. And you can see how every time we get perfect layering. Now, if you were creating a one-layer card and you're stamping directly onto a note card, the stamp positioner works great. I'm actually using smaller pieces that I had as scraps today, and I plan to die cut those out. It doesn't matter where you want to stamp, the stamp positioner works great. Now let's do the third layer of our sunflower. I'm stamping right into the corner of that L shape onto a piece of vellum. This is a Snapdragon ink. And I'll line that up. You can see how easy it is to just kind of rotate it around and line it up perfectly. Once you have it lined up, you hold the vellum in place, put the L-shaped piece right up against the corner. Then you remove the vellum, ink up your stamp, and stamp that into the corner. Now I continued this process with additional layers on the leaves and on my flowers. It may take an extra step or two to use the stamp positioner with stamp layering, but is definitely worth it. I feel you get much better results than trying to eyeball it as you are using an acrylic block and trying to line up each layer. And by the way, one of the easiest ways to create your own stamp positioner is to take 2 rectangle acrylic blocks and to tape them together into an L shape. But if you want to invest in a stamp positioner, they're inexpensive, and I like the one that I bought from Art Impressions, which I'm using today, but there are many on the market. Okay, now that I've done my stamping, I thought I would show you the cards that I created with these stamped images before moving on to other stamp layering techniques. So for this first example here, I used some new products from Altenew. This is the Altenew Crystal Frame Stamp Set and Die Set. I actually used the die set alone today, but I wanted to show you the frame stamp set since they coordinate together nicely and it has lots of great sentiments, especially for inside of the card. On today's card, I die cut this solid piece and the outline of this piece. You can see both dies are included in that set. I'm putting liquid adhesive around the outside edge of the solid piece, and then I'm putting on top a die cut of the outline piece that I created from gold mirror cardstock. It creates the perfect frame. For the background, I'm using the Studio Katia grid die. This is a great die that die cuts all those little squares, but also a nice pierced and embossed frame around it. And I'll use this a few times today. For this card, I die cut it twice from white cardstock, and I glued them together for a stacked look. I then glued that onto a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white note card. You could get away with 1 layer of die cut on this, but by doing 2, it makes it stand out more since we're doing white on white. I then added our die cut focal piece and our die cut stamped images that I created earlier. I stamped thanks from that same sunflower stamp set and added Tonic Midas Touch Aqua Shimmer pen to the center of the flower. That's a gold shimmer pen that I thought was perfect for the center of a sunflower. Here you can see the thin gold frame that we have around that thanks die cut and that grid layered die cut that we have in the background. I really like the simple design and plan to make several more of these to give as a note card gift set. Okay, with a few of the other sunflower images, I created the card that you see here. I used the same background die, but this time I layered a sentiment over the background and the card itself. The large thankful sentiment is from the Sunny Studio Elegant Leaves stamp set. It has such a classic feel to it. I stamped that large thankful over one of the grid die cuts. So this is the same die cut I used in the last card. I'm just taping it to my work surface to hold it still, inking up with Altenew Obsidian black ink, and stamping that right over the grid die cut. After I've stamped that, I'll go ahead and pop out all those tiny little squares. I will then stamp the same sentiment onto a solid piece of white cardstock. After both are stamped, I can glue them together, being sure to line up that thankful sentiment. This allows the sentiment to be stretched across the card and that die cut. It gives this fun textured look. After trimming that piece down, I added it to a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch note card. I also added a sunflower and a few leaf images to the center, and also some bees that I stamped from that same sunflower stamp set. Those bees are so cute. I like that by stamping across that die cut, it gives a fun look of texture, and it's a very simple technique. Okay, let's go ahead and do some more stamp layering and some variations of the technique I taught you with this stamp positioner. This is the Sunny Studio Everything Rosy stamp set. This is an older stamp set that I've been wanting to use for some time, so I created a bunch of roses today to use for future cards. Now I'm going to use this stamp positioner once again. This will be very helpful in layering the many images on here. I think there's like 5 or 6 layers to this rose, but it creates such wonderful results. I did the first layer of the flower and the leaves, but notice the ink is very light. If I tried to stamp with a light ink on my guide, I wouldn't be able to see through it. So instead this time, I'm using a black ink. This is Altenew Obsidian black ink. I'm stamping it into the corner of my L shape, right onto the clear guide that comes with my stamp positioner. You can see how bold that is, so it'll be easy to line up. So now the reason I chose this particular black ink is it cleans up easily from the stamp. Now I'm lining that up with the solid image below, right into the corner of the L shape. Now I'm inking up my cleaned stamp with a slightly darker pink ink. This is Altenew Pinkalicious, and I'm stamping that into the corner of my L shape. So on my last examples, I stamped my ink onto a piece of vellum, and I could easily see through that vellum to the image on my cardstock below. But since these colors of ink are lighter, I found it easier to stamp on my clear guide with black ink. This is how it was intended to be used, and then clean off my stamp, and then stamp with my colored ink. And by the way, after you stamp your layer, keep that L shape in place. In this example, I didn't stamp my second layer completely. Since my L shape is still there, I can go ink up my stamp again and stamp it exactly on top. So in this case, my darkest layer for the leaves was so dark that I could stamp on vellum and see through it. But if I wanted to, I could use the clear guide that comes with it. So it's up to you if you use the clear guide with black ink or the thin pieces of vellum with colored ink. I prefer to use the thin pieces of vellum with colored ink as you see here. However, if your ink is too light, you'll definitely want to use black ink with the clear guide. And as I mentioned, the reason I chose Altenew Obsidian black ink is it cleans off nicely from the stamp, so I can switch between the black ink and the colored ink very easily. Another ink that cleans off very easily is Gina K Amalgam ink. Okay, so now we're on to another layer of this rose, and you can see how easy it is to line up here with the vellum piece, still using that stamp positioner. There's actually yet another layer to this rose, but I skipped one of the layers. I really didn't feel I needed it for these examples, but I like that they have so many layers that you can really build this image up. Now I use mostly Altenew inks today. The reason I used Altenew inks is because they have their inks available in sets of 4, where there's a light, medium, dark, and extra dark in a color family. So it's easy to figure out which layer together. But in this case, there's 5 or 6 layers to the flower. Here's a trick that I like to do. For the darkest layer, I just take one of the lighter colors and stamp it a few times right on top of each other to make it darker. So if you don't have a ton of different colors, try double or triple stamping to create a darker color. I've talked about this many times in videos in the past, and I'll link to a few videos at the end of this one in case you're interested. But here you can see by using the stamp positioner, we can easily layer all of these layers together to create the realistic looking roses and leaves. Okay, so now that we've stamped a bunch of roses and leaves, let's create some cards. I'm using the Sunny Studio Retro Petals die. This is a great die that has a frame, but also that center area that you can use together or separately. They actually come apart, and I'm going to use them both ways today. For my first card, I die cut them together from white cardstock twice and glued them together for a stacked look, and then put them on a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch white note card. I arranged my little flowers and leaves and added a sentiment strip. I then die cut the same background from a light pink cardstock. And now I'm adding some of those little pieces into my background for a fun inlay look. So I'm just kind of randomly adding them in there using my jewel picker to pick up each tiny die cut and put them into a drop of liquid adhesive. So here's the final card. It's got a lot of dimension to it, but it does keep that focus on that flower and sentiment. Now the sentiment itself that says always thinking of you is from a newer Altenew stamp set called the Pen Sketched Flowers stamp set. This set has beautiful flowers, but also some simple, wonderful sentiments that are great to add to cards. Okay, let's create another card using the rose images that we layered. In this case, I used the same background die, but only the center portion. I left the frame off. I'm putting that on the front of a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch white note card. And I'll run that through my die cut machine. This will cut all those little holes in the front of our card. Next, I created a note card that's a bit smaller. It is 4 inches by 5 1/4. I'm putting glue on the back of it and then gluing that on the inside of our die cut note card. This creates a card inside of a card so that we can write a personal message on the inside and it won't show through the front of our card. While my card is open, I'm putting a little liquid adhesive on the front panel and then adding a rose with some leaves attached to it. I also have a thin sentiment strip where I'm putting a piece of thin foam tape behind it, and then I will put that right on the front of our card. Once I've put it in place, I'll flip it over and use my anti-static powder tool over the back to make sure that none of the sticky is exposed because that would tape our card shut. I then added some pink jewels to it. I used the Pinkfresh Studios Essential Jewel set. I like this set because there are many different colors included in it, and I used the softest pink. Some are glued to the front of the card, and some are glued to the inside card. So here's the completed card. From the front, you can see through. I really like that layered look. And there you can also see the rose that we created with the stamp positioner. When you open the card, you could have a little sentiment stamped there, but I decided to leave it plain, and then I'll write a personal message inside. Now, the sentiment that I stamped on the front of the card is from this My Favorite Things stamp set. It's called Well, Hello There, and this set has lots of simple sentiments. It's a smaller set, so the price point is good, and there is a coordinating script hello die that goes with it. I'll be using this set again later in this video. I have one more example using our stamp layered rose. In this case, I used the same background die, or at least the center portion, but instead of die cutting, I made an impression on my note card and inked over it. So I'm using my Spellbinders Platinum 6 die cut machine here, but any die cut machine would work. I'm also using this tan colored Spellbinders embossing mat. This mat allows you to make an impression with a die instead of cutting with your die. So you can see it's got a little bit of flex to it. I put my cardstock on top of that. Then I put my die onto that face down, put a cutting plate on top, and run it through my die cut machine. This presses the die into the paper. As I mentioned, many die cut machines can do this. You just need to read the instruction manual. And there we have our die pressed into the cardstock. It gives a beautiful embossed look. After I did that, I took one of my blending brushes and I applied some of the Altenew Pinkalicious ink towards the bottom center. I like how the textured background picks up some of the ink and it makes that pattern stand out more. I'm putting some foam tape on the back of one of my roses and leaves, but I wanted to be sure this really stuck on that textured background. So on top of the foam, I'm putting liquid adhesive. This allows me to wiggle it around on my card until it's centered, and it'll be sure to stick to that textured background. Finally, I added a simple sentiment strip to that and a few more of those Pinkfresh pink gems. That's hard to say. Pinkfresh pink gems. And we have a very simple card with a little bit of a pink glow behind our roses. Again, that sentiment is from this My Favorite Things Well Hello stamp set. Before we go, I have one more card example for you and some simple variations on using a stamp positioner for stamp layering. This time I'm using the Sunny Studio Slice of Summer stamp set. Again, this is one that I've been wanting to use. I really like the look of the layered watermelons. So I started by stamping the first layer of the watermelons onto white cardstock, and again, I'll link the ink colors that I used below. One thing I wanted to mention, when you use a stamp for the first time, sometimes you'll notice that the ink kind of bubbles up on the stamp. I'm going to freeze it here so you can see. See how the ink is kind of bubbling up on the stamp? That's because I've never used it before. Here's the trick to avoid that. When you get a brand new stamp, take a dry cloth and really firmly wipe across that stamp. It'll take the shine off the stamp. It'll kind of mute it down a little bit, make it look cloudy. But then when you ink it up, watch, the ink will stick to it beautifully and then transfer to your paper beautifully. So once again, I have my stamp positioner. I found that when I stamped on the clear guide with the red ink, it just didn't do well. So I'm stamping with the black ink. Now I'm putting the guide right over our first layer, put the corner L-shaped piece up against it, inked up my stamp with red ink, stamped that down into the corner, and there we have our second layer to the watermelon. I continued that with the other pieces to the watermelon. This one's really easy to line up. I wanted to show you there's another way to use this stamp positioner. It can be used simply to give you a steady hand when you stamp. So in this case, I could see through this outline of the watermelon. I could see through it to line it up easily. So what I do is I stamp it right down perfectly without any ink onto the watermelon, put the L shape up against it, then ink up my stamp and go back to the L shape and press right into the corner. So you don't have to use the guide. You can simply use the L shape to help you give a steady hand and make sure that you stamp in the exact same position that you want to. You can actually double up inking with this, anything you want. I really feel like the stamp positioner is a very handy tool to have, even if you have a stamping tool. I reach for it quite often. Okay, so here's my finished card. I created 2 of those watermelon slices, and then I added it to a background that I created with an embossing folder from Sunny Studio. I did first stamp the Thanks a Melon sentiment, then I ran it through this Lots of Dots embossing folder. You can use that with any die cut machine that you have, and it makes these embossed dots that are perfect for simple card. All right, there you have yet another way to get stamp layering. I know I've done a few videos on this, but I get so many questions, so I'm really hoping this is helpful to you. If you're interested in the products I use, they are linked below in my YouTube description to several different sources. And there are a couple other videos here in the center that may be useful for you. Thanks for watching once again. I hope you have a wonderful week, and we'll see you again very soon.